Some choices aren't choices at all. They're traps life drops right in front of you. A ruthless boss, a lone cowboy, and an ultimatum that froze everyone in their tracks. Marry my ugly daughter or leave this ranch tonight. The cowboy agreed, thinking he understood the cost. But on the wedding night, when he finally lifted her veil, what he saw shook him to his core. Why had the boss lied? And what truth was he hiding in that house? Stay with me, because this story only gets wilder from here. And at the end, don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment. The ranch yard was silent, except for the faint creak of leather as Eli Hargrove tightened the cinch on his mare. His hands were steady, but his heart was. The words of his boss, Silas Bramwell, echoed in his mind with the weight of a death sentence disguised as an offer. Marry my daughter or leave. Eli had faced storms, bandits, wild stallions, and nights alone on the prairie with nothing but a dying fire for company, but never had he felt a choice sit so heavily on his shoulders. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and every instinct warned him of it. Eli wasn't one to back away from trouble, but this felt different. The entire ranch buzzed with whispers, men glancing at him with pity or amusement, none brave enough to say their thoughts out loud. Silas wasn't asking, he was cornering him. Everybody knew that when Silas Bramwell wanted something, he got it. Yet Eli couldn't shake the feeling that the truth behind this forced marriage wasn't just about a shy, unattractive daughter. There was something hidden, something Silas wasn't saying. And the fact that he refused to let Eli meet her only deepened the unease twisting inside him. The sun was sliding behind the hills when Eli walked toward the main house to give Silas his answer. The porch boards moaned under his boots, and for a moment he wondered if the house itself was trying to warn him away. Silas opened the door before Eli knocked, as if he'd been waiting, listening for those footsteps. The older man's eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade, reading Eli before he even spoke. Eli lifted his chin, refusing to look uncertain. A man could be scared and still be brave, and he needed every ounce of courage now. "I'll do it," Eli finally said, though his stomach turned. Silas didn't smile, he simply nodded, a short, heavy gesture that sealed the deal like a signed contract. He didn't offer thanks, didn't speak of honor or family. He just said the words that chilled Eli more than any winter wind. "Be ready by sundown tomorrow. You'll see her then." Eli left the porch with the feeling that he had stepped willingly into a trap built years before he ever rode onto Bramwell land. And for the first time, he wondered if saving that stallion had been a blessing or a curse. Night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, pressing down on Eli's thoughts until sleep became impossible. He sat by the dying fire behind the bunkhouse, staring at the embers as if the answers he needed would glow within them. Why would Silas force a marriage? Why hide his daughter away? Why speak of her as if she was some shameful burden? Eli had known hardship, desperation, and loneliness, but he had never known a father who would trade his daughter like property. Every minute he spent thinking made the shadows around him seem deeper, stretching long fingers toward his future. The next morning, work continued as if nothing had changed, but everyone felt the tension. Men avoided Eli's gaze, some muttered quick prayers. Even the horses sensed it, snorting and stamping as if the air carried something wrong. Eli forced himself to move through the routines, feed, water, saddle, ride, but each task felt unreal. When Silas rode past on his black gelding, he gave Eli a long look, measuring him like stock at auction. Eli returned the stare without blinking. If Silas wanted a man who would cower, he'd chosen wrong. Whatever lay ahead, Eli would face it standing. By midday, one of the older ranch hands, Amos, approached Eli with a stiff gait and worried eyes. Amos had been on the ranch longer than anyone and had seen enough strange things to fill a dozen campfire stories. He lowered his voice as he spoke. "Eli, you don't have to do this, son." Eli studied the man's face, lines carved deep from years of sun and sorrow. "Why are you concerned?" Amos swallowed hard. "Because nobody's seen the girl in years, not since she was little, and Silas. He's changed since then. Whatever he's keeping locked in that house, it ain't normal." Eli wanted to dismiss the old man's fears as superstition, but something in Amos's trembling voice made his skin crawl. Folks around the frontier told tall tales, sure, yet this didn't feel like a tale. It felt like a warning. "What aren't you telling me?" Eli asked. Amos shook his head. "Can't say, ain't my place, but I'll say this, some things get hidden for a reason, and some reasons ain't meant for the livin' to poke at." With that, the old man walked away, leaving Eli with more questions than answers and a growing sense that he was stepping into darkness blindfolded. As the day slipped toward evening, the ranch shifted into quiet preparation. A table was set in the yard, lanterns hung along the fence, and a preacher from the next town was brought in by wagon. The air felt thick, like before a storm. Eli dressed in clean clothes, his hands slow and tense as he buttoned his shirt. This wasn't how he pictured marriage, not an ounce of joy, no hope, just the slow march of inevitability. When Silas finally approached him, the man's face was unreadable, carved from stone. "Everything is ready," Silas said. "She'll be down soon." Eli took his place near the makeshift altar, the preacher on one side and Silas on the other. The ranch hands gathered quietly, their faces pale in the lantern glow. Then the door to the main house creaked open, and a woman stepped out, her face completely hidden behind a heavy white veil that reached her waist. She walked slowly, stiffly, as if every step cost her something. Eli couldn't see her form clearly, couldn't discern anything, except that she kept her head bowed low. A cold sensation crawled up his spine. Something about her movements didn't feel right at all. She stopped beside him, trembling slightly. Eli swallowed hard, trying to push away the dread coiling in his chest. The preacher began speaking, but Eli barely heard a word. All he could think about was the veil, the shape beneath it, the question of what Silas was hiding so fiercely that he'd threaten a man's livelihood to keep her married off. And as the preacher reached the final words, instructing the groom to lift the veil, Eli's heart hammered painfully. His fingers twitched, hovering near the cloth, fear and curiosity warring inside him. When he finally grasped the veil's edge, he felt the world tilt. Eli hesitated, only a heartbeat, before lifting the veil. Time seemed to stretch thin as the fabric rose, inch by inch, until it cleared her face. And in that instant, every whisper on the ranch, every warning from Amos, every strange instinct Eli had felt, collapsed into a single breathtaking truth. She wasn't ugly, she wasn't even close. She was beautiful, but not in a way that made sense for a woman hidden for years. Her features were delicate, her eyes a deep, soulful green, shining with fear and something that looked almost like a plea for help. Eli's breath caught in his throat. The collective gasp from the ranch hands rippled through the yard like a shockwave. It wasn't beauty that frightened them, it was the expression she wore, not shy, not timid, terrified. She looked at Eli with desperation, as though she feared for his life more than her own. Before he could speak, she whispered so softly only he heard, "I'm sorry." The words chilled him. Why would she apologize, and for what? Silas stepped forward. "Continue," he barked at the preacher as if nothing were wrong. Eli instantly understood. Whatever was happening, Silas needed this marriage to be sealed, not for his daughter's sake, for his own. The preacher continued shakily, but Eli kept his eyes on Rosaline. Her hands trembled as she held her bouquet, knuckles white. She leaned slightly toward him and whispered again, urgency trembling through her voice. "You can still walk away, please. If you stay, he'll never let you go." Eli glanced subtly at Silas. The man stood rigid, jaw tight, eyes burning with an intensity that made Eli's skin prickle. This wasn't the gaze of a proud father. This was the look of a man guarding a secret he would kill to protect. Eli turned back to Rosaline and whispered, "Why is he doing this?" She shook her head ever so slightly. "Not here, not now, but if you say yes, you're tied to him forever. He'll use you the way he uses everyone." The preacher finished his line and looked expectantly at Eli. "Do you take this woman?" The words faded into the background. Eli's pulse thundered. The ranch hands held their breath. Silas stared like a coiled rattler ready to strike. Rosaline stared at the ground, tears forming. Eli understood the danger. If he refused, Silas would ruin him, maybe worse. But if he accepted, he'd be stepping into a web he didn't understand. Eli lifted his chin. "I do." A tremor went through the crowd. Silas relaxed faintly, though his eyes stayed sharp. Rosaline exhaled shakily, then whispered, "Thank you." But Eli could tell her gratitude hid fear, and her fear became his burden. When the preacher concluded, Silas clapped his hands once. "Good, now the two of you will come inside for a private word." It wasn't a request, and it didn't feel like a father welcoming his new son-in-law. It felt like a warning. Inside the house, the walls felt closer, the air heavier. Silas shut the door firmly before turning to Eli and Rosaline. "You'll honor this marriage," he said coldly. "No running, no questions, no meddling." Eli stared at the man, anger simmering. "You forced me into this." Silas stepped closer, invading his space. "I offered you a future, you accepted." Eli didn't blink. "What exactly have I accepted?" Silas paused, then spoke with a quiet menace. "A lifetime here, beside my daughter. Under my roof." That's all you need to know." Rosaline flinched, as though she'd heard these words before. Silas left abruptly, leaving the two alone. When the door slammed, Rosaline exhaled a shaking breath. "I tried to warn you." Eli softened his voice. "Then warn me now, tell me the truth." She looked up, eyes glistening. "My father doesn't want a son-in-law. He wants a successor he can control. Someone strong enough to run this ranch, loyal enough to follow orders, and desperate enough to stay. He wants someone who won't question what he does in the locked barn at night, or why men disappear from this ranch sometimes." Eli stiffened. "Disappear?" Rosaline nodded. "He runs things beyond cattle. He deals with men you never want to know. He hides things, dangerous things, and once you're part of his family, you're chained to it." Eli paced slowly, absorbing the truth. "Why keep you hidden?" Her voice broke. "Because he believes showing me would scare decent men away. He needed the right mix of bravery and desperation. You saving that stallion made you his perfect target." Eli rubbed his jaw. "If he's dangerous, why stay?" Rosaline's eyes darkened. "Because he's my father, and because leaving isn't an option. He watches everything." Eli approached her gently. "You're not alone anymore." She looked up, startled. "He'll come after you if you try to help me." Eli gave a thin, confident smile. "Then let him come." Outside, bootsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. Silas was returning. Rosaline grabbed Eli's arm. "Please, don't confront him, not yet, he'll kill you." Eli shook his head. "No, he won't." Rosaline's eyes widened. "How can you be so sure?" Eli stepped between her and the door, voice steady. "Because a man who hides behind threats is weaker than he pretends, and I've faced worse than weak men." The door swung open, Silas filling the frame with a hateful glare. Eli met it without fear. The battle for power, for truth, for Rosaline's freedom had begun. And though Silas didn't know it yet, the one thing he'd never planned for had just happened. Eli wasn't a man who broke easy, and he sure as hell wasn't a man who stayed silent. What Silas didn't realize was that by forcing Eli into this marriage, he hadn't trapped him. He'd created an enemy who would burn the whole ranch down before letting Rosaline spend another day in fear. And this time, Eli wasn't riding alone.